Well, it's a privilege today to invite Dave back up to share a word with all of us today. And I just want to say that, Dave and we have known each other forever, a long, long time. And but this past year, we've really gotten to spend a lot more time together, working together on the Maturing in Messiah class. And we meet every week and process and talk and get into great conversations and all the material and everything. And I've just really, really enjoyed that. And so this is a message that will also be up as one of the Maturing in Messiah videos as well. So you don't have to listen to it twice. And I'll be doing the same thing next week. And we just thought our theme right now is on community, both in the class for this unit and also in our congregation right now. So why not share? So Dave, why don't you come up and lead us? And again, if the rain starts to come a little bit heavier, just huddle underneath your umbrella and we'll let you know if it gets to be, we'll make a change. But let's pray that it doesn't.
Yeah, let's. All right. I'm okay. I'm under the tent here. It's,
Speak up a little bit too.
Yeah, we'll do. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. I feel very privileged to stand up here and say a few words. I'd like to talk about Shavuot. Can anybody hear me okay in the back? Great. So tomorrow night, as you all know, we've been counting down to this. We're counting up to it. We begin the festival of Shavuot. It may be, it's a little bit of the Rodney Dangerfield of holidays, right? It doesn't get a lot of respect. I think that's partly because of the stories that, Passover is easy. It comes 50 days after Pesach. So Shavuot, we eat dairy. That's memorable. We celebrate the giving of the Torah at Sinai. Many people, I think of the fall as the time for Jewish holidays. But the fall, the big boys, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, they only kind of rose into prominence relatively late in our history. At the time of the biblical texts were written, Shavuot was one of the Shalosh Regalim, the 3 pilgrimage festivals where we would go up to Jerusalem. And of course we see this in the Gospels. Yeshua goes to Jerusalem, or his parents bring him at these certain times every year. Passover has themes that we talk about a lot, right? There's an emphasis on communicating our history and our values to our children, and it commemorates the time when God brought us out of slavery in Egypt with a strong hand and an outstretched arm. That one mighty act of the Exodus, in large part, gave us our national identity. You could say that by redeeming us from Egypt, God made us into a people. Our tradition says that God led us me'avdut lecherut olam, from avdut, slavery or servitude, lecherut olam, to eternal or abundant freedom. Many seders today for Pesach, I know it feels like it was forever ago, but many seders focus on the freedom that we were given in Pesach, and we rightly connect that to the freedom that many people don't feel today, right? There's oppression in the world, there is political or religious oppression, and it's a good opportunity to apply that to where we can spread that freedom and give it to others. This is wonderful. But what does it mean to be free? I think this is a hot topic today. I don't want to confuse the Bible's use of the word freedom with freedom in the sense of a lack of restrictions or obligations, right? It is not freedom, in the biblical sense anyway, to drive 95 miles per hour on Mass Pike. I mean, the Mass Pike, though, everyone's done that. Or freedom to avoid paying taxes, or the freedom to eat ham sandwiches on Yom Kippur, obviously, right? It's not that kind of freedom. It's not freedom to take care of number one while letting go our obligations to others in society. I think some streams of American thought would express freedom of it's mine, as is mine, I can do what I want with it. But the Torah is very clear that in this, if you accept the Torah's version of as an ideal, a Torah society as an ideal, a utopian society in a sense. Just in last week's Parsha, God says, the land that I'm giving you all land, but it's not yours, it's mine. You're going to have to give it back every 7 years, So freedom as we understand in the Torah is not about just doing whatever we want. If that's the case, then what's it about? I'm going to make a case here that it's about being true to ourselves. Now, when I say, as a side note, true to ourselves, I don't mean true to ourselves as individuals. I think when you say be true to yourself in today's world, there's this idea, it's an utterly individualistic sense, right? There's society puts you in this shell, and to be true to yourself, you need to break out, right, and reject all these bonds that society has put on you. That kind of assumes that there's this pure you hidden in there. I would dispute that, right? I think it's not necessarily. There's this pure you and you're inherent in your DNA, and society puts you in this shell. I will stop short of saying that's totally washed up in bupkis. I actually think it's not totally. There is a very important sense of the value of the individual, and in that sense the Hebrew Bible was revolutionary for its time, but that's in context. It's possible we've taken that too far. Humans are social animals, and our social identity is a real and a very legitimate part of our identity. So this freedom after leaving Egypt was not a license for our ancestors to go do what they wanted. We didn't get to the other side of Yam Suf, of the Red Sea, and God said, okay, everyone make it? Good. It's been nice. It's been fun. Hope maybe we'll meet again. Off you go. See you later. That didn't happen, and that's what we're celebrating at Shavuot. He had plans for the Israelites, and I think we can imply from that God has plans for us as well. So this is where Shavuot comes in. The redemption of the people of Israel was not complete after the Exodus. I would argue it's not even complete today. Physical liberation from Egypt was, as they say in the movies, just the beginning. God was not simply bringing us out of Egypt, but bringing us to himself. The festival Amidah that we say on Shavuot says, V'keravtanu malkeinu la'avodatecha, or you have drawn us, O our King, drawn us near to your service. So what is this service, this avodah? God drew us near by bringing us to the mountain, but it would not have been complete had he not given us his Torah when we got there. And this is the key point, I think, for us to bring home, that we were brought out of Egypt for a purpose. It was not just to relieve our affliction. In fact, the Hebrew word for slavery that's used to describe the plight of our ancestors is avdut, right? It's the same word as avodah. Not just related, it's the same word. In the language of the Bible, there is no significant or obvious distinction between slavery, or we might say servitude or service, if it makes you feel better, and worship. That's the word for worship. What really happened to us there, I would say, is a change of master. We were brought out from serving Pharaoh into lives of serving God. Or you could say we were brought from slavery in Egypt to become slaves to God. I don't know, we're having buyer's remorse. Maybe that's why everyone wanted to go back to Egypt. But the implication of this, and this is something I think we mention often here in our community, is that God desires our service. Or more accurately, perhaps, God demands it. It's quite an obligation. But this is the meaning of the term where he says he wants us to be Mamlechet Kohanim, a kingdom of priests. This is what it means when he says, Kedoshim to you, you shall be holy. When he commands us to be holy, it is to be a people drawn near to fill a particular role. It's our job description. So we've talked about how we were brought out of Egypt, not necessarily for the sake of our own individual goals and desires, not for the freedom to do whatever we want, but for the freedom to be brought close to God and to do this job. So how are we brought close? By the Torah. Now, parenthetically, I want to say that I'm saying we intentionally, right? As we know, we read in the Haggadah that when we talk about the Israelites being brought out of Egypt, we are to think of it as if we ourselves had been brought out. The rabbis also say, when we talk about from Sinai, it is not only you who are before me today, it is all your descendants after, right? So we all, in a sense, by entering into this covenant, we were almost literally there at Sinai with him. So we may be asking, what does this matter for today? How do we draw this into today's life? What does this have to do with modern life? The lives we live are different. And I think one part of the answer to that is that the story of the Exodus, and you could say Jewish identity, defines us only as much as we allow it to. This is America. We live in a a great but flawed society where a person can either take hold of their past or to discard it like a garment that's gone out of style. We can choose to enter into Israel's story, or we can choose not to. We can accept other stories. There are plenty of stories out there, right? There are plenty of narratives that we can grab and we can allow to shape us. We can actually cut ourselves off from our people. In the Torah, that's a punishment. You'll be cut off from your people. Today, that's quite common. It's almost the thing to do, to take the social part of your identity and amputate it. Where I came from, that doesn't define me. I'm going to walk away from it, or maybe run. But all of you have, by being here, virtually or physically, decided by your presence, you've chosen to enter into Israel's story to some degree. So practically speaking, I want to look at the Torah reading for the second day of Shavuot, where we read about the offerings for the Shalosh Regalim, the 3 pilgrimage festivals, where people would come up to Jerusalem and worship at the temple, this place where he would put his name. Let me read briefly from one of these readings. It's from Deuteronomy 16, 10 through 12. Then you shall observe the Feast of Weeks for the Lord your God. The Feast of Weeks is Shavuot, offering your free will contribution according as the Lord your God has blessed you. You shall rejoice before the Lord your God with your son and daughter, your male and female slave, the Levite in your communities, and the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow in your midst, at the place where the Lord your God will choose to establish his name. Bear in mind that you were slaves to Egypt, and take care to obey these laws. So essentially, we took our offerings up to Jerusalem and financed a huge party. I mean, that's kind of what's happening there. For our whole household, and we're even reaching. We're not even if you don't even be that closely associated to our household. The stranger, the fatherless, and the widow, the people who don't have households, they're coming along. We're going to bring them. These offerings, if you read the other sacrifices, I think we have an impression of them in our minds. They weren't just to keep the priests fat, or they weren't just burning up the whole thing, like wasting all this, barbecue. But the offerings were for us to eat together. Not all of them. They're different ones. It's not even so much of an offering as a potluck, right? So I'd like to make one more observation about that. The commandment that we just read, you can't fulfill it by yourself. You need a Levite. You need your family. You need the people in your community who don't have anyone else. You need the stranger. You need some priests. And let's be honest, if you're going to have a party, you probably need some musicians. Someone's going to have to decorate. The point is, it takes a community. Now, this is not unusual for mitzvot, commandments in the Torah. This is why you can't live as a Jew in isolation. You can't pray the whole prayer service without a minyan, so you need at least 9 other Jewish adults if you want to say Baruch Hu, as we were fortunately able to do today. You need women for some mitzvot. You need men for others. You need children. You can't have a bris without a baby, or at least I wouldn't recommend it. The Jewish life needs community. Observance of the commandments requires community. In other parshiot, it's Parshat Tarumah, in the past we've spoken of the building of the tabernacle, of the Mishkan, and how God said, let them build me a sanctuary, and I will dwell among them, from Exodus 25. Ve'asu li mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. Doesn't say, build me a sanctuary, and I will dwell within it. It says, build me a sanctuary, they will build me a sanctuary, the asu, plural, and I will dwell within them. Israel, the community, is this receptacle for God's presence and purposes in this world. This is true for the kahal, the community, in ways that it is not true for an individual Jew. Now this relates to a philosophical question about the mitzvot that I find interesting. I'll forgive you if you don't, but when God made us a people, did he do so in order to have someone to do the mitzvot, or did he give the mitzvot in order to bind us together as a people? Tzitzit is our uniform, Shabbat and festivals is our shared calendar. I think the answer is yes, to both. The mitzvot are special and important in their own right. And also, yes, one of the keys to understanding the mitzvot is that they bind us together. Our unity and our shared life is inherently valuable. This reminds me of an old Alan Arkin movie. I think, Dad, you know this movie. Coup de Ville. About a dad who gives his 3 sons, who are estranged from each other and they don't get along, a job to do. He wants them to drive this Cadillac, this like vintage Cadillac from Detroit down to where he lives in Miami. Spoiler alerts, by the way, so you can just plug your ears if you don't want to hear this. On the trip, they have all kinds of adventures. They fight, they reconnect, and they make it all the way to his neighborhood in Florida before they have an accident and put a dent in the car. They know he's going to go ballistic. They get there, at the end of the movie, and he says, no big deal. It wasn't about the car. He says, it was about you. You did this together, and now you're friends. That's a big change, and we've seen this happen throughout the movie. The car was a means to an end. It would bring them closer. We can think of mitzvot in that sense as well. And this is why we are here. We are here to live out Torah, to observe Torah, to study Torah for its own sake, but also for the sake of binding us together, to each other, and to our people everywhere. It's not just, we're not isolated. We're not the only Jews in the world, right? We're not the only Talmidei Mashiach in the world. That's where God lives, right? B'tochenu, in us. In our community, we're going to have all kinds of different levels of commitment and types of involvements. There are going to be virtual members in far-off lands. There are going to be physical members here, carrying the Torah, slicing challah, shoveling mulch, digging trenches, assembling sheds. I could go on and on. There will be those who are here every week and give much, and there will be those who are here occasionally and take what they need and give less, at least for a season. And that's okay. In the pilgrimage, the involvement of the landowner is different from the widow and the orphan, but they're all essential. I would like to invite everyone here, and this is an invitation that I know Rabbi Nathan and the other leadership here has extended. This is a standing invitation that's been open for years here, but let's bind together and take a stand against some of these other narratives. There's, if you know me, I'm not, isolated from mainstream culture. You can follow me on Twitter at, I'll tell you later. But we do need to stand, I think, on some level against a culture of acquisition, a culture of independence. The acquisition is a trap. The independence is a fiction. Let's lean into our interdependence and let us build more than we buy, give more than we take. And if we lift each other's burdens, I believe we're going to find that someone else is helping us lift ours. I'm still looking for ways to do this practically. I'm sure many of you are too. And let's do it. We'll be patient with our progress. While the vision in Deuteronomy for the pilgrimage festivals could be just read and understood as a tax on livestock for a big temple, it's not presented that way in the text. And it wasn't understood that way in our tradition. Instead, it's a vision of a big party in a holy city where everyone eats to satisfaction and we do it in joy. So let's do this. Let's do it together. And may Hashem establish the work of our hands. Shabbat Shalom.